What if I told you that a frozen island in the Arctic could trigger the collapse of NATO, hand Europe to Russia, and open the door for China to dominate the global economy? What if the fight for Greenland becomes the moment historians mark as the beginning of America's strategic decline? This is not science fiction. This is geopolitics, and it is happening right now. The real game behind Greenland. When we examine the current situation around Greenland, NATO, and the strategy of Donald Trump's administration, we must throw away all the comforting liberal talk about values, democracy, and international rules. To understand what is really happening, we must look through the cold lens of offensive realism. In international politics, there is no world government, no higher authority to protect states. The system is anarchic. And in this anarchic world, great powers behave like rational predators. Their primary goal is survival. And the best way to survive is to accumulate power, ideally enough power to become a regional hegemon. What we are witnessing around Greenland and Russia's reaction to Trump's ambitions is a textbook example of power balancing and strategic maneuvering. Let's begin with the most fundamental truth of geopolitics. Geography matters. Greenland is not just a massive block of ice, it is a strategic goldmine. As glaciers melt, new Arctic shipping routes open, and access to enormous natural resources becomes possible. Control over Greenland gives the United States an unmatched advantage in the Northern Hemisphere. From a realist perspective, Trump's desire to acquire Greenland is completely rational. He sees it as strengthening American power, but the devil lies in how this policy is pursued. International politics is a zero-sum game. When the United States talks about annexing territory from a sovereign European ally like Denmark, it undermines the very alliance system America built after World War II. Alliances are not friendships. They are marriages of convenience, created to counter a common enemy. NATO was built to contain the Soviet Union. After the Cold War, its purpose became questionable, yet Washington chose to preserve and expand it to maintain dominance in Europe. Now, look at Russia's reaction. Russia's silent applause. The Russian government newspaper we are analyzing is a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Notice something important. Moscow is not criticizing Trump. Why? Because Russia understands power politics far better than modern European liberals. The Kremlin sees Trump's actions as a weapon to destroy transatlantic unity. If Trump pressures Denmark over Greenland, it will deliver a fatal blow to trust inside NATO. Russian strategists are not fools. They know that if the leader of an alliance behaves like a predator toward its own members, Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause, becomes meaningless. Why fight NATO when America can destroy it from within? When Russian media compare Greenland's annexation to Abraham Lincoln abolishing slavery, this is not praise. It is manipulation. Moscow wants to push Trump into actions that isolate America from Europe. Russia wants the United States to stand alone. Because in a world without strong American alliances, Moscow gains freedom to maneuver, especially in Ukraine and Eastern Europe. Russia sees NATO expansion as an existential threat. For years, I have argued that pushing NATO to Russia's borders was a catastrophic Western mistake. It provoked this conflict. Now Russia sees an opportunity to paralyze NATO through the actions of the American president himself. That's why they applaud Trump. Not because they love him, but because their interests temporarily align. Russia's goal: dismantle Europe's security architecture. Trump's goal: demonstrate greatness through territorial expansion. And while they play this game, a third player laughs the loudest. China, the silent winner. In offensive realism, China is the only real competitor to the United States for global leadership. While Washington is distracted by Greenland and quarrels with Europe, Beijing quietly continues its rise. China is a master at filling power vacuums. When Trump threatens allies with tariffs and sanctions, he pushes them straight into China's arms. Look at Canada's electric vehicle market. If Canada, America's closest ally, starts opening doors to Chinese technology because of trade wars with Washington, it means America's strategy to contain China is collapsing. You cannot contain China while fighting all your friends at the same time. That is simple power arithmetic. To balance China, the United States needs strong allies in Europe and Asia. Turn Greenland into a conflict, and you lose Europe. Lose Europe, and you lose Asia. Now let's talk about Taiwan. Taiwan and the semiconductor trap. If the United States becomes isolated, Beijing may conclude that the price of forcibly taking Taiwan has dropped. Taiwan controls the world's most critical semiconductor production. Without those chips, the American economy and military simply cannot function. If China controls Taiwan, it gains dominance over the global tech supply chain. That is checkmate in the struggle for hegemony. And all of this begins with America choosing ego and short-term territorial gains over long-term balance of power. Trump views the world as a series of real estate deals, but Greenland is not a hotel in Manhattan. It is a pillar of global security architecture. When you threaten allies to grab land, you change the rules for everyone. Europe in shock. Europe is in shock. For decades, Europeans lived under America's security umbrella, spending money on welfare instead of defense. Now they face a nightmare scenario. Their protector might become their bully. From a realist perspective, Europe must grow up and pursue its own power politics. If the EU is America's biggest trading partner, it should use that leverage. In world politics, only power is respected. Angry letters achieve nothing. We must accept a harsh truth. The liberal rules-based order is dead. We are back in a 19th century world of great powers, spheres of influence, and territorial grabs. If America sacrifices alliances for symbolic victories, Russia will rebuild its influence in Europe, and China will dominate Asia. Greenland might look like a victory in American textbooks, but in geopolitical history, it will be remembered as the moment America dismantled its empire for an illusion of greatness. The Napoleon trap. Russian media compare Trump to Napoleon for a reason. Napoleon also believed he could redraw Europe's map. He won battle after battle until every great power united against him. His empire collapsed. If America behaves like Napoleonic France, it will provoke a counter-coalition. And that coalition may include not only enemies, but former friends. The world is unstable. Ukraine is bleeding. Russia sees this war as a fight for survival. China is watching, waiting for America to drown in internal chaos. Every decision the U.S. president makes should be judged not by election polls, but by how it changes global power in 20 years. Maps are not just territory, they are networks of alliances. Erase the line between ally and enemy, and you plunge the world into chaos. And chaos favors those prepared for long wars. Russia is used to suffering. China plans decades ahead. America seems ready to gamble everything on one deal of the century. Strategic suicide. Greenland is a litmus test. If America chooses unilateral annexation and alliance destruction, we enter a multipolar world where the U.S. is just another player. Russia and China are waiting. America's security always depended on preventing a single hegemon in Eurasia. By destroying NATO and alienating Europe, America clears the path for Russia in the West and China in the East. That contradicts every principle of American grand strategy. This is the paradox. Trying to secure the Arctic, Washington risks exposing its flanks in Europe and Asia. Empires don't fall because they are conquered. They fall because they confuse real power with displays of power. Greenland was once a passive buffer. Turn it into a dispute, and you drag yourself into an unnecessary conflict. Denmark and the alliance crisis. Denmark is not just a small state. Copenhagen is a key node in European security. When Washington talks about buying or annexing Greenland, it sends a message to every NATO member. Your borders are sacred only when they don't inconvenience us. This destroys trust. If Poland or the Baltic Sea America disrespect Danish sovereignty, they will ask, what happens when Washington decides Tallinn is too expensive to defend? This creates a twisted security dilemma inside the alliance itself. Now, allies fear America as much as they fear Russia. This is Putin's dream scenario. Russia's psychological warfare. Russia understands that power is not just tanks, it's perception. By flattering Trump, Moscow drives wedges between America and Europe. If Europe stops trusting the U.S. nuclear umbrella, it faces two choices. 1. Build its own army, decades and trillions. 2. Make deals with Moscow. Both push America out of Europe. China moves. And Xi Jinping is watching closely. Every hour Washington fights Danes or Canadians is an hour not spent strengthening alliances in Asia. China's Belt and Road Project is reshaping global economics. If America looks unstable, even Japan and Australia will hesitate. Now consider rare earth minerals. Greenland has them. China controls 90% of global supply. Trump's desire makes sense, but his method is disastrous. Instead of cooperation, he creates fear, and fear pushes Greenland toward China. Chinese companies already tried to invest in Greenland's ports and airports. Washington blocked it using Danish influence. But what happens if Denmark stops listening? Overstretch, the empire killer. You cannot fight everyone at once. Napoleon, Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union. They all made the same mistake. They surrounded themselves with enemies. America is walking the same path. Ukraine was a tragedy born of Western arrogance. We assumed Russia would accept NATO at its doorstep. It didn't. Now we open a second front against our own allies. That is geopolitical insanity. Putin and Xi don't need to act. They just watch Washington burn its own house. Canada and continental security. Canada is not just a neighbor. It is part of America's defense system. NORAD protects North American skies. Trade wars with Canada weaken continental security. If Ottawa looks for alternative partners, China will happily step in. China already calls itself a near-Arctic state. Absurd geographically. Dead serious politically. The 2040 scenario. Imagine 2040, China's economy dwarfs America's. Russia dominates its neighborhood. Europe is fragmented and distrusts Washington. America is trapped in its hemisphere. Greenland will look like an expensive, useless trophy. Final verdict. Realism teaches us the world is dangerous. Strength matters, but strength must serve strategy. Our goal? Prevent a Eurasian hegemon. Greenland does nothing for this goal. If it destroys our alliances, this is a classic tactical win. Strategic defeat. If America becomes a predatory hegemon, the world will unite against it. Imagine a China-Russia-Europe bloc. That is every strategist's nightmare. Out's conclusion. Geography is destiny, but politics is choice. We can choose alliance leadership or imperial bullying. The first won the Cold War. The second leads to disaster. Greenland is not a prize, it is a test. And so far, we are failing. Alliances are our fence against the wolves. Is Greenland worth burning it down? History will judge us not by land gained, but by peace preserved. If we forget this, America will join the graveyard of fallen empires. Because great powers don't fall from one blow. They bleed from 1,000 cuts. Let Greenland not be the fatal one.